On a quiet Christmas morning, Alex, a young man with a compassionate heart and a natural urge to help others, noticed a lonely elderly woman sitting in sorrow. Hoping to lift her spirits, he bought her small gifts and treats, thinking it was just a simple act of kindness. But an hour later, his peaceful day was interrupted by a knock at the door. Standing outside were a group of lawyers bringing unexpected news, something connected to his kindness that would change his Christmas in ways he never could have imagined. Hi everyone, welcome back to Unveiled Narratives. Today, I have another heartfelt story to share with you. On Christmas morning, Alex knelt in a quiet corner of the community center, whispering a silent prayer. He prayed earnestly for kindness and peace to fill the world and for strength to handle his daily struggles. As his prayer ended, he stood up and adjusted his scarf. A quiet smile spread across his face, and his eyes lit up with excitement for the day ahead. This Christmas, Alex had saved just enough for a special meal at his favorite Mexican restaurant, a small luxury he hadn't indulged in for months. To most people, it might seem like an ordinary thing, but for Alex, it was truly special. Cravings for his favorite tacos filled him with excitement as he thought about the small sacrifices he made to save enough, cutting back on coffee, skipping snacks, and stretching every penny. Now he could finally treat himself to a moment of comfort and joy, a small celebration to help him forget his struggles, even if just for a little while. With those thoughts, Alex began walking toward the community center's exit. But as he passed a quieter corner, his steps slowed. There, sitting alone on a bench away from the bustling crowd, was an elderly woman. First, he assumed she was simply resting, but as he walked closer, he noticed her slumped shoulders and her face lowered to the ground. Quiet tears were falling onto the dry floor beneath her. His heart sank. His excitement and cravings faded as concern took over. Something was clearly not right. He hesitated briefly, unsure if he should approach, but then decided to step forward. "Excuse me, are you okay?" he said softly, careful not to startle her. The elderly woman looked up, startled by his presence. She quickly wiped her cheeks, trying to compose herself. For a moment, she said nothing, her lips pressing into a thin line. Finally, she spoke, her voice heavy with emotion. "It's nothing really, just memories," she said weakly, forcing a small smile that failed to hide her sadness. Alex sat down beside her, giving her enough space to feel comfortable but showing he was willing to listen. "Sometimes sharing what's on your mind can make it feel a little lighter," he said softly. "I'm here if you feel like talking." The woman glanced at him, then nodded. "I hope to spend Christmas with my daughter and meet my grandson," she said softly. "I went to see them, but they turned me away, said they had other plans." Her voice cracked, and she paused, taking a shaky breath. "I was so excited to see them, to be part of their lives again, even if just for a day. But they didn't want me there. Now here I am, spending Christmas alone. I don't even know why I came to the community center, maybe to feel less lonely." Alex's heart ached for her. "I'm so sorry," he said softly. "No one should feel this way, especially today," his voice filled with compassion. The woman nodded weakly, wiping her eyes with a trembling hand. Alex stayed by her side, and after a moment of silence, he looked down at his wallet, almost instinctively touching it as though making a decision. An idea sparked in his mind. Though his plans for the day had centered around his own small celebration, he realized there was something far more important he could do. The elderly woman needed kindness and connection more than he needed that meal. In that moment, he decided he wouldn't let her spend Christmas alone. He stood up and told her softly, "Wait here, I'll be back in just a moment." The woman nodded, though her expression remained uncertain. Alex walked toward the community center's exit, his steps steady with purpose. As the elderly woman watched him leave, her shoulders sagged and a quiet sadness crept back over her. For a moment, she thought he might not return, and the familiar weight of loneliness began to settle in once again. But Alex had no intention of leaving her behind. He stepped into a nearby shop, determined to bring a little joy to the elderly woman. He carefully selected a cup of hot cocoa and a warm pastry, thinking it might bring her some comfort. As he approached the counter, A beautiful Christmas card caught his eye with its bright, festive colors. He picked it up and, after a moment of thought, wrote a short message inside, something simple yet hopeful. His words were meant to remind the woman that she wasn't alone this Christmas and to bring her a small glimmer of happiness. The billing counter, Alex began counting his money and realized that the little he had saved for his special meal was now spent on these items. But he didn't hesitate. He remembered the prayer he had whispered in the community center and knew in his heart that making the elderly woman smile, even for a moment, was more meaningful than any meal he could have. This act of kindness was his true joy. After paying the $50 bill, Alex stepped out of the shop and walked back toward the community center, his heart filled with quiet purpose. He clutched the small bag of offerings tightly, hoping they would brighten the lonely woman's Christmas. As he neared the bench, he saw the elderly woman still sitting quietly, her head lowered in thought. Before approaching, he cleared his throat gently and extended the warm cup of cocoa toward her. "Here," he said softly. "This is for you." The woman looked up, startled by his presence. For a moment, her tired eyes widened in disbelief as they landed on the cup. "You came back," she whispered, her voice unsteady. She hesitated, glancing at his face as if to confirm his intention. Then, with trembling hands, she accepted it. thank you so much," she murmured. Alex placed the pastry and Christmas card beside her on the bench. "I thought these might make your day a little better," he said, his tone kind and encouraging. The woman's gaze lingered on the card. She opened it cautiously and read the short message he had written. Her lips trembled, and she blinked rapidly as if holding back tears. You didn't have to do this," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "It's been so long since someone showed me kindness." Alex sat down on the bench beside her, leaving a respectful distance. "I just wanted to help," he said softly. "It's Christmas, and no one should feel alone today." The woman exhaled deeply, holding the warm cup in both hands. After a moment of silence, she spoke, her voice carrying a quiet sorrow. "I just wanted to feel part of a family again, even for a little while." Alex's heart ached for her. After a brief pause, he said, "You don't have to be alone tonight. Why not come to my place? I'd love the company." The woman looked at him, her expression a mix of surprise and doubt. "You've already done so much." "I don't want to impose," she said softly. "You're not imposing," Alex said firmly. "Please, it would mean a lot to me, too. Christmas is better when it's shared." She stared at him for a moment, her eyes glistening. Finally, she gave a small nod. As they stepped into Alex's small apartment, he welcomed her warmly, holding the door open with a reassuring smile. The space was humble but inviting, radiating a quiet charm. Though the furniture was mismatched and showed signs of wear, a couch with frayed edges, a coffee table bearing faint scuff marks, everything was neatly arranged and spotlessly clean. It was evident that Alex took pride in creating a cozy, comfortable home despite his modest means. In the corner stood a small Christmas tree, decorated with a few well-worn ornaments. A single string of lights blinked unevenly, casting a soft glow. The elderly woman paused near the tree, her gaze lingering on it. One of the lights had slipped from a branch, hanging loosely. She reached out and gently adjusted it, tucking it back into place. The tree looked a little brighter now, and a faint smile crossed her face. Alex noticed her by the tree and smiled. He gestured toward the couch. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll get us something to eat. Won't take long." The elderly woman nodded and sank into the worn armchair near the tree. As Alex disappeared into the small kitchen, humming softly as he worked, her eyes wandered the room. A stack of papers on a side table caught her attention. She hesitated, then picked one up. It was a utility bill stamped with the words "past due" in bold red letters. Beneath it were more envelopes, each bearing similar notices, the amounts owed scrawled in pen on the corners. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the bills back down. She glanced toward the kitchen, where Alex was humming softly as he prepared the meal. He moved efficiently, dividing portions of what appeared to be leftover ingredients into small containers before setting aside just enough for their meal. It was a simple act, but it spoke volumes. Every ounce of food was carefully accounted for, a testament to his frugality and struggle. The elderly woman leaned back in the chair, her thoughts churning. This young man, despite facing such obvious hardships, had extended kindness to her without hesitation. He had spent his own money to bring her a meal and welcomed her into his home, asking for nothing in return. Her heart ached, filled with a mixture of gratitude and admiration. When Alex returned with 2 steaming bowls of vegetable soup and 2 small plates of cornbread, he handed her a bowl with a warm smile. "Here we go. It's not fancy, but it's warm and hearty and a little festive," he said, sitting down across from her. The elderly woman accepted the bowl with a grateful nod, her hands trembling slightly as her eyes flicked to the golden-brown cornbread topping. "You've done so much for me already," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "I can't imagine how I could ever repay you." "You don't have to," Alex replied, his tone gentle but firm. "Kindness doesn't need repayment. It's just how the world should be." The elderly woman stared at him, her eyes glistening once more. For the first time in a long while, she felt the true spirit of Christmas, not in material gifts or grand gestures, but in the quiet generosity of a stranger who had given her something far more valuable. As they ate in silence for a few moments, the warmth of the meal seemed to settle between them. The elderly woman glanced at Alex, her brow furrowed with thought. She had noticed the overdue bills earlier, and couldn't ignore the signs of struggle surrounding his modest yet tidy apartment. Setting her spoon down gently, she broke the silence. "You've been so kind," she said softly, "but it seems like things have been hard for you." Alex hesitated, his gaze dropping to the cornbread between them. For a moment, he seemed torn, as though reluctant to burden her with his struggles. Finally, he exhaled and gave a small, almost apologetic smile. "I don't usually talk about it," he admitted. "I don't want anyone to think I'm making excuses or seeking pity." The elderly woman shook her head gently. "Sometimes sharing can lighten the load, even just a little." "I won't judge." Encouraged by her sincerity, Alex finally spoke, though his words came hesitantly. He explained his situation. He had been working at a small local business where the workload was overwhelming, and employees were often overworked without proper recognition. When he raised concerns about the unfair treatment and questioned some of the company's practices, he hoped for positive change. Instead, he was fired abruptly. To make matters worse, the company refused to pay him the salary he was owed. With no other option, Alex had been living off his savings while taking small freelance jobs online to cover basic necessities. Despite his best efforts, finding stable work had been a challenge, and every day was a struggle to stay afloat. The elderly woman's expression softened with empathy as she listened. After a moment, she said gently, "You've endured so much, yet you still have the strength to help others. Don't lose hope." Alex nodded faintly, his gaze dropping to his hands. "I thought about fighting back," he said softly, his voice heavy with exhaustion, but I just couldn't handle it with everything else I'm dealing with. I'm already struggling every day. I'm just hoping a new job will help things get back to normal." The elderly woman looked at Alex, her expression thoughtful yet resolute. For a moment, it seemed like she wanted to say something but held back. Instead, she simply smiled warmly and said, "You've done more for me today than I could ever repay. Just remember, Alex, sometimes help comes when you least expect it." Alex tilted his head slightly, confused by her words but too tired to question them. He gave her a faint smile, assuming her remark was just a gesture of gratitude. Their conversation gradually shifted to lighter topics, filling the room with a quiet sense of ease. Before long, the elderly woman stood up, her movements deliberate and unhurried. She thanked him warmly one last time before excusing herself for the evening. With a soft, thoughtful smile, she stepped out into the stillness of the night, leaving Alex to reflect on the unexpected bond they had formed. An hour later, Alex was seated at his desk, immersed in his freelance work. The apartment was silent save for the occasional click of his keyboard. He hoped that this project might bring him closer to some much-needed stability. But his focus was broken by a sudden knock at the door. Startled, he glanced at the clock. It was late, and he wasn't expecting anyone. Unease crept in as he stood, hesitating for a moment before cautiously opening the door. When he opened it, he froze. Standing there were 4 impeccably dressed lawyers, their expressions warm yet serious. Behind them stood the elderly woman from earlier, her familiar kind smile now tinged with quiet determination. In her hands, she held an envelope wrapped in decorative paper. "Good evening, Alex," she said gently. "I hope I'm not intruding, but I wanted to see you again." Alex blinked in confusion, his gaze shifting between her and the lawyers. "What's going on?" he asked softly. The elderly woman stepped forward and handed him the envelope. "This is for you," she said. "You showed me kindness when I needed it most, and now it's my turn." Alex stared at the envelope, his hands trembling. "I don't understand," he murmured. "You don't have to do this. I didn't help you to get something in return." "I know," she said with a small, knowing smile. "That's what makes you deserving of it. Please open it." Hesitating, Alex slowly opened the envelope. His breath caught. Thank you for watching this story unfold. If you found it engaging or thought-provoking, please give the video a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories to life. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We appreciate each and every one of you for being part of our community. Together, we can keep the conversation going and inspire change. See you in the next video.